not here to influence you. Please know that you can have a successful and satisfying watercolor year with little more than a set of Crayolas and something to make marks with. Oh, and decent paper, of course. But if you have it in the budget to pick up a few game-changing items, this is the video for you. And even if you don't have it in the budget, there's definitely dupes, so don't go anywhere. There are five specific items that are actually not even watercolor related that are going to change your watercolor game in 2025. Now, I'm not just gonna show you these items and wax poetic. I'm going to show you how to use them and wax poetic. Be sure to stick around because one of my choices is truly an innovation in the art world. It's just not a version of something that's been done before. You have to see this. I know I said I wasn't here to influence you, but Craftsy, y'all, they have a major deal for you, and I can't think of a better way to get more confident in all the creative skills I'm about to talk about. But you'll have to stick around for more on that later. First up for the 2025 must-haves is bleed-proof white. This isn't anything new, but I do think it's still quite innovative. It's been described as an opaque white watercolor. I liken it more to a really intense white gouache, which I guess they're kind of the same thing. Here's the rub. When you apply it over dyes, inks, watercolors, anything that would usually bleed into a second layer of a water-soluble art supply, it's not going to do that. It's going to kind of lock in the color below. So you can imagine all the cool stuff that can happen. Now, I will say this. When it's used wet on wet, mixed media, so wet bleed-proof white with wet watercolor or ink or dye or whatever you can imagine, the results are incredible. Lots of cool creeping and cauliflowering like you see here. I'm using it on black paper, but this also happens on normal watercolor paper. I think it's incredible for backgrounds and just anytime you want to add that little brightness back into a painting, whether it be softly and in a muted way where it's blended, or beautiful sparkly highlights like in the white of an eye or a water droplet shine on a petal of a flower. All right, we have the second product that's going to change your 2025 watercolor game, and we have your Pentel sign pens. I first discovered these in a tiny little shop when I was in Europe, and I honestly can't even remember what country I was in, but I opened up the cap and I was like, oh my gosh, it's actually a brush tip. Not like one of those fake, if you've been around for a while, I can't stand when companies call brush tips when they're actually just soft felt tips. But I digress. These are actual nylon bristle brush tip markers. And whatever's in them, I'm having a hard time finding out what exactly is in them. It acts like watercolor, but it's super bright. So it's probably like a dye-based ink, a watercolor ink, something like that. They are incredible for mixed media, and they play really nicely with, you guessed it, bleed-proof white. I have been using these in a lot of my artwork for the last 6 to 8 months, honestly, ever since I came back from Europe, because they have inspired me so much. And you might be wondering, how are they different from, let's say, my favorite watercolor markers from Kuretake Zig Clean Color? Well, they just seem to be more juicy, and I really like that. Now, of course, the color selection's more limited, but for me, that doesn't matter at this stage for the way I'm using them. All right, it's time to talk about our sponsor, Craftsy. Craftsy is an online community of creative, like-minded makers. Sound familiar? Where members can find endless inspiration. You can advance your skills and discover your newest favorite hobby. A few months ago, I actually went onto Craftsy and figured out how to create a really cool succulent scape, if you will. And while my succulent scape still looks really cool in terms of composition, it's not looking so hot in terms of I clearly don't know how to take care of succulents. Let's just say that. So I've headed back to Craftsy to see if I can find anything about succulent care. And of course, I have. I mean, I'm not surprised. With over 2,000 classes in more than 20 creative categories, there's always something new to learn. And a little secret, I'm actually a Craftsy instructor. I have a class all about watercolor flowers, so I can tell you from personal experience the care, attention, love, and just utter expertise that goes into producing the videos that you see on Craftsy.com. Step-by-step instruction, helpful downloadable resources to help make learning even easier. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click on the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49, y'all. $1.49. The third product you can't live without as a watercolorist in 2025 is none other than Fyess 100% watercolor paper. Now listen, I'm a hardcore Academy paper lover, not to mention Arches, but if I'm going to be real, I go through paper like water, and mama can't afford the good stuff all the time. A dear member of this community, her name is Dee, she recommended this paper, and I have been hooked ever since. It's like $14 for 125 by 7 sheets. I will say this, there's a caveat. The sizing on this paper is unpredictable, but not to the point that it's super annoying. And if you do washy, juicy, expressive watercolor like me, it's just going to become like a little extra happy accident in your day of painting. I have been using this paper throughout the entire video so far and will continue to do so you can see just how it works. And of course, friends, I have all of the supplies I've been talking about listed below in the description. Now, of course, I get a little bit of change every time one of y'all buys something from one of my links, but you know the drill. I don't support a product unless I actively use it and I'm absolutely in love with it. Now, speaking of in love with it, if you're having a good time and you feel like some of the things I've mentioned here are going to change things for you a little bit, or you're just enjoying listening to me rattle on about art supplies, would you go ahead and give this video a boop? In watercolor land, that's a like, and it really helps out my channel. The fourth product that could really take your watercolor game up a notch is a spendy one, I'm going to admit. Kakimori metal nib and holder sets. This is a bullet nib. Now, I have not had a lot of experience in dip pen and all the things, and I don't even know if I'm calling it the right thing, but when I got this baddie in my hands, it really changed things for me. So the spend was well worth it. Now, I realize that statement, the quality of the nib and the handle are just out of this world. I have been using my first set endlessly since midsummer of last year, and there's not a single sign of wear and tear except normal staining from the ink. It works really well on cold pressed watercolor paper, not just smooth papers, and the fact that I've been using it on a rough paper hasn't seemed to deteriorate the nib at all. And my favorite part, it holds a ton of ink and it gives you the most exquisite variation of line quality without a lot of effort. Now, I bet with all the art supply videos that are rolling around right now at the time of recording this about all the supplies that you should and shouldn't get in 2025, I'm assuming you have your own ideas and I would love to hear them, and I know others would too. So go ahead, get into comments and let me know what supplies you couldn't live without. And remember, we're not just sticking to watercolor here, mixed media friendly space, okay? The fifth product that isn't necessarily watercolor that I feel you've got to give a try in 2025 is the fountain pen ink from Tom Studio. The color is important here. It's Marianas blue. It's like the perfect non-black color. It has richness, it has a little bit of vibrancy, and it just has gorgeous, gorgeous coverage. And ding, 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 you guessed it, it works perfectly with the Kakimori spendy metal nib and holder. It also acts a lot like watercolor, especially since that when it is dry. Now, I'm not talking like a year dry, a week dry. I'm talking like an hour dry. It is still going to release when you re-wet the area, which I find to be really useful and honestly fascinating when it comes to an ink. And as you would expect, when this is wet and you bump up next to it with water or watercolor or whatever it may be that is wet, magic happens. Now get in there with some bleed-proof white and Lordy, you're gonna have yourself a good mixed media time. It's your turn now. I'm leaving you with a challenge. I want you to go find one bit, one supply, one nib. Go grab it, don't buy something new, and give it a try along with your favorite watercolors. And then go ahead and tag me on Instagram at Kristy the Painter because I want to see what you made. Happy painting.